Hello. So you got a lot of time to think when you paint. And my mind wanders to all sorts of things. And that's sort of what my this video, this channel is all about. Is just things I think about when I paint and sharing things. And, I look things up and stuff like that. And a little bit of history, a little bit of science, a little bit of personal opinion on stuff, including politics. Now, for those of you who weren't paying attention, we've had an election recently, 2 weeks ago. Would have made this video last week, except for, my computer was having problems. And so, I didn't want to be just another political pundit wannabe giving my opinion on the election. So I kept my mouth shut until after the election. And so now I'm going to share some of the thoughts I've had during the election, some of my opinions. Internet influencer shouldn't influence the way you vote. But nothing wrong with sharing your opinion. So like I said, I waited till now to share my political opinion on the election just because I didn't want to be another, trying to tell you how to vote. However, so the next 2 or 3 videos I make are going to be about the election and my point of view about it. First one being why I like Donald Trump. Now, this is something, you mentioned you like Donald Trump and people have a hissy fit over, how can you like him, blah, 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 blah. Well, this is why I like him. Now, when I say like, I don't mean I adore him, I don't worship him, I am not a part of a cult, which there is no cult of Trump, only, the cult of Trump only exists in the minds of radical leftists who think there is a cult of Trump. People who believe, people who like Trump like him for his policies, they recognize that he has his flaws. No one thinks he's perfect. Except for in the minds of, like I said, a few radical leftists who want to believe that you worship him, which nobody worships Trump. We like him more than we like other people because of his policies. There are some people who take this overboard, but the purpose of this video isn't to get into that sort of thing. I'm just giving a disclaimer here that I like Trump. I don't worship him. He's human. He makes mistakes. I acknowledge that. I believe he will make fewer mistakes than Kamala Harris or Joe Biden made. And so I support him. And I like him in general. So let's jump back. Late 80s, the early 90s, Trump became big on the scene. Don't know exactly when. Understand a lot of what I'm saying here is coming from my memory. Because, when you like or dislike someone, I don't think you should turn around and do a bunch of research to prove why you like or dislike them. You should go with what's in your head. So, I'm going to make mistakes here. I'm going to get some things wrong. But this is based on my observations of what's been going on. And my memory of those observations. That's the first thing is, in an ideal world, we would have perfect information to make our decisions based on. In the real world, we got to rely on our memories. We got to rely on misinformation coming at us. We got to rely on a lot of stuff. So, everything I say here isn't going to be 100% accurate just because I'm relying on my memory. This is day to day why I believe in Trump, why I like him. So, like I said, late 80s, early 90s, he became popular. Back then, the liberals loved him. We got this rich guy who wasn't afraid to be in your face. So the liberals loved him. It was actually conservatives who looked at him a little sideways. Because he was saying a few weird things, like some of the bad things he said about women back then, which everyone came out, oh, how could he say that? Well, the liberals loved it back then. It was the conservatives who were saying, wait a second, that's sort of a little crude. You shouldn't say that. Now, that was 20, 30, 40 years ago. He matured. He changed his mind on some of that stuff. And so he apologized for some of it. And then the liberals didn't want to accept it, even though they loved it when he said it at the time. And I'll accept people, they get older, they change their opinion. Benjamin Franklin, go back, read his early writings, compare them to his later writings. The guy changed his opinion. No one criticizes him for it because he got older, he got more experience, he saw some of his ideas from the past weren't as good. I know people who hated Benjamin Franklin, but they've never really studied his life that much. So Trump made some mistakes when he was younger. Um, Went on, did The Apprentice. The Apprentice, I never watched The Apprentice. Basically, he turned. We're going to do a job interview as a reality television show. And that I wasn't into. I was never been into reality TV, so I wasn't interested in that at all. Um, but some people loved it, and it was that's where some liberals started falling off from him. Some conservatives started to like him. Um, he was still fairly popular though. Did some McDonald's commercials. Not a McDonald's fan myself, but that just sort of shows. McDonald's has always been somewhat of a liberal company, and they wanted him in their commercials. So, sort of shows that the liberals loved him when he was younger, and when he was making these weird statements and being rude to women and stuff like that. Then he started getting into politics, and it came out, oh, wait a second, this guy's actually conservative. And that's when the left suddenly hated him. And capitalist, conservative, big surprise there. But so the left really started hating him. When it came to the point of, oh, this guy might be president, that's when I started paying more attention to him. So, like I said, going back old memories, my what I've said so far is just based on what I can remember from the past. And no, I didn't go back and start studying it at all because, like I said, if I'm going to say I like or dislike the guy, I should have done that years ago. If I was going to base it on that, it's based on what I've seen. And then people started lying about him. Now, when it's obvious someone's lying about you and they're trying to make you look like a bad person, that's when I say maybe I should start looking for the good in this person. I was still worried about him getting into politics, though, because he was an entrepreneur basically. He ran, Trump Towers, and he had all his other holdings, and he was used to having his way. And I wasn't 100% sure, okay, is this guy going to realize that the President of the United States there are limits to the President's power? And that was something I was concerned about. At the same time, 2016, his opponent was Hillary Clinton, who, for the past 25 years, I was very much aware that she was not. She doesn't realize that the president has limited power. Based on seeing her as First Lady and the comments she made then, seeing her as Secretary of State, seeing her as a senator, she believes that the president has absolute power, in my opinion. Everything she said, I am convinced that if she had won the presidency, we would be living in a dictatorship. She is, in my opinion, the most fascist leader of the 21st century, in American politics at least. So, while I was worried about Trump, I was more worried about Hillary. And so I was sort of very neutral there. I'm not gonna really say anything about Trump, but can he really be worse than Hillary? And the answer ended up being no. He was president for 4 years, did not try to take over the world, did not try to take over America, did not try to take over all our rights. He was actually a very good president. Possibly, in my opinion, the most constitutional president of my adult lifehood. So, he has that going for him suddenly. I suddenly started liking him more. Now, the problem with his first term in presidency was he was never allowed to do anything right. Anything he did, no matter how successful, he's human. So his success isn't going to be 100%. There's always going to be that 5% that's not good. And the press glommed onto that 5% and acted like that was the whole thing. I've said in the past, I will say it again, if Donald Trump had spun straw into gold and, you know, paid off the national debt, the headlines the next day would have read, yes, but now what will the horses eat? He was not allowed to succeed. Anytime he did anything good, they looked for the bad and they acted like the bad was the entire thing. And like I said, there's going to be 5% bad because he's human. And so that happened repeatedly. There was the time that he visited Japan and he was talking to the leader of Japan. I forget, don't know if they have a president or not. I forget what it is. And they were doing the koi feeding ceremony, which is this basically you got a box of food and you spoon it out to the koi, and you couldn't hear the voice, you couldn't hear the words on it or not, but there was far enough away you couldn't hear it, don't pick up what they were talking about on the camera. But they're talking to each other and they're scooping out the food and spreading it out for the koi to come and eat. And basically, if you watch the full video, which most people didn't, he was taking his actions off of the leader of Japan. The guy would scoop something out, Trump would follow. And they're talking as they're doing this. Very end, their little box of food is nearly empty. The guy just dumps his in there. Trump just dumps his in there. The clips a lot of people saw, because they didn't watch the full thing, they show they're there and Trump dumps his stuff in there and that's it. And there are comments, oh, we have this beautiful Japanese ceremony and he just completely did it wrong and he insulted the Japanese people because he dumped his stuff in there like he didn't care about it. And no, that's not what happened. He took his lead off of the leader of Japan. And if you watch the full video, you can see that's what he's doing the whole time. But no, that is the... Yeah, the one I liked was when someone made the comment, this is a beautiful Japanese ceremony going back thousands of years. Like, I'm reading this, I'm thinking, buddy, all you know about Japan is what you've read, what you've seen in Japanese anime, which has absolutely nothing to do with true Japanese culture. Or traditional culture, at least. I mean, it's sort of modern culture, I guess. And so, don't act like Trump somehow insulted you in this ceremony. But that was the first 4 years. Anything he did, no matter how successful, the media glommed on to the little bit which went a little awry and acted like that was the entire thing. Now, when I see stuff like this happening, especially when I can see, this is, I've seen the full clip and you're just focusing on one part of it, I start looking for the good in the guy. If someone lies to make you look bad, then there must be some good they're trying to ignore. And again, Trump, he didn't try to take over the nation. He didn't try to instill dictatorship, like people said. Things were going well under him. So I started to like him even more. Then we had the 2020 elections, which I will say 50% chance that was stolen. And I know that's going to get people to turn against me. But my reasoning on that is for the arguments he made that it was stolen, no one really wanted to take a serious look at him. He went to court with it, and all you would see was the whole, no, you don't have proof. We're not going to look into this. And that's all that happened repeatedly. He had his charts which showed, here it is, and then 5 o'clock, 5 o'clock when they closed the polls down, there's a sudden spike in the Democrat votes coming in. That looks suspicious. I mean, that can happen. I've studied statistics. That can happen, but as someone who has studied science, I know most scientists will look at an anomaly like that and say, we should look closer at this. And instead, everyone said, no, 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 that's nothing. Just ignore it. And if anyone really had disproven it, then we would have heard about it. I mean, that's comedy gold there. Trump holding up his charts and showing all this, and look at these strange anomalies. If we had actually proven, yeah, you're making this stuff up, or we have a good explanation for it, then all the comedy, late night hosts would have had skits about it. Saturday Night Live would have had skits about it. All this, none of them did. This is comedy gold if it is really as explainable as you think. Instead, people just ignored it. I can come up with an explanation that would explain those spikes, but no one else tried to, so I'm not going to say that right now. There is the whole red mirage blue shift theory, which could explain it, except for the fact that we would still expect a higher spike in the red shift as well, or in the Republican votes too, because again, these were the votes being counted afterwards, or these are like mail-in ballots that we've closed down the polls. Now we're going to run these, and some of those should have been red, some of those should have been blue, and instead we saw this strange spike where they were all blue and very few red. So if you want to try to use the red mirage blue shift argument, you've got to admit that the shift isn't going to be 100% blue. There's going to be some red in that shift, and there wasn't. So that's my analysis of that. Now that said, he protested. January 6th comes around. Riots broke out. There is no proof to really link him with those riots, although they tried and tried and tried, and they took his words out of context and continued to try. So again, when you're going out of your way, when you're twisting someone's words, when you are trying to change the English language to support that this guy's bad, and it's obvious that you're doing that, then I start to look for the good in the guy. And I might not find it all the time, and I'll admit, Trump's not perfect, and there are things to criticize him for. But was he really that bad? And the answer is no. January 6th, they tried to impeach him. Oh, he was impeached twice, yes, and they found nothing. Impeachment is just take him to trial. He was found innocent both times. But he was found guilty of 34 felonies later. No, he wasn't. Wait a second, but the court records are wrong. So, what happened there? The prosecutor openly admitted that none of the charges against him were felonies before the trial started. However, I plan on showing that this is a pattern of behavior which is all leading up to a bigger felony. And he never did. Not that I've seen, at least. I'm not a lawyer. I don't know how to call up the records and look at them that closely. But again, I'm going to trust enough people who are against Trump. CNN's legal analysis, they would have had a legal expert telling us how these are felonies, or how the felony charge works, if it really did. I can find no clip showing that. They got the word felony in, and then they never proved it from my point of view. I haven't seen them prove it. And they just went by momentum. We got felony in there now. All we got to do is find guilty on the lesser charges, and felony will stick to it. And let's even suppose, okay, they did prove it, and I just didn't see it. One felony, not 34. Everyone's saying he was found guilty of 34 felonies. No, he wasn't. 34 crimes which were not considered to be felonies, added together, we're going to show how they make up a big felony. That's one felony charge. Not 34 separate ones. But everyone, again, including all the major news outlets, outlets were saying 34 felony charges were proven against him. They have legal experts. They have people who know the law better than I do who should be able to look at it and say, no, this is really only one felony, if they proved it was a felony to begin with. Which, again, I never saw. And again, the media never proved, or the media never came out and backed up. It was up. Jury found him guilty, and therefore 34 felonies against him. Jury was following instructions from the judge, who was biased from what we've seen from other sources. So right there, we actually have the ability to overturn this finding, just because it was so completely misrepresented. There were obvious problems with the way it was presented to the public. Therefore, obvious problems with the way the jury was probably presented. I could get that overturned in court, and I'm not even a legal expert. Based on what I've seen, I'm convinced I could get that overturned in court. Now, having won the presidency, President Trump, or the future President Trump, can pardon himself if he wants to. Yeah, that would be funny, but I would suggest he doesn't do that, just because go through the courts and show that there's a sham trial against you, and that the final judgment was against the law, because again, it wasn't 34 felonies, it was only one, and I'm not convinced that was proven yet. So go with that, overturn it that way, do it the legal way, don't just do it by fiat. Otherwise you're letting other people do things by fiat, and I'm against that with the law. Okay, so even after that, well, he was a Nazi, and he was a fascist, and that was, for the last 3 or 4 weeks of campaigning, that's all that was said about him. No proof given about it. Study your history, learn a little about, I'm not an expert in history, but I know a lot about the fascists and Nazi Germany and stuff like that, to say Trump wasn't the Nazi going on here. Everything, pointing the finger and saying Nazi or fascist and not giving proof of that, again, I start to get suspicious about you. And I start to trust the person you're accusing even more. And nothing he did was really fascist or dictatorship or Nazi or anything like that. Based on everything I've studied about history, which I've studied history more than apparently the people who accused him, because they don't apparently even know the definition of fascist or Nazi. It's just a word they threw out because you can turn people against other people by accusing them. So that's it. Like I said, I like Trump's policies. His campaign, everything he said in his campaign, he isn't trying to force his opinion on people as much as his predecessor. And by his predecessor, I mean, when he gets into office, his predecessor, the guy who's currently in there now, Biden. Biden and Harris are bigger fascists than him than Trump, in my opinion. Not going to go into that. Again, that's my opinion, so I'm not going to point the finger and yell fascist, Nazi, or whatever. I'm just going to say, when you look at their policies, they more closely resemble. That's more closely resemble doesn't necessarily mean you are a fascist. It just means that you lean that direction more, which you can lean a little bit, you can lean a lot. There's a difference between the two, So again, when people start yelling words like Nazi and fascist, I start to look in those directions, look in those definitions, and who's more of one than not. But that's not necessarily saying, oh, this person is definitely a fascist, or this person is definitely a Nazi. It's more along the lines of, wait a second, you're accusing someone of doing something which is closer to what you're doing. Not saying that you are doing it, you're just closer to it than them. So there are shades of gray and stuff like that in this whole. I don't like accusing people of being a Nazi or accusing people of being a fascist if it's avoidable. But when other people start yelling, pointing the words around and accusing people, then I start to make comparisons. And so, my opinion, Trump was not the fascist in this election, or he was the least fascist of the two. And that's it. So that's why I like Trump. People want to say, well, how can you support Trump and blah blah blah. Well, it's because you've been listening to propaganda. Half of what you've heard about Trump is false. No, he did not threaten a bloodbath. No, he does not think Mexicans are animals. No, he does not think all Middle Easterners are terrorists. And if you look at his full quotes, then that would be obvious. But the people who say otherwise believe you're stupid, and so that's one thing. I'm really against people who assume that their voters are stupid. Trump's never done that, in my opinion, or I haven't seen anything where I can accuse him of that. So that's it. That's all I have to say on this. Like I said, my next 2 or 3 videos will be on my political view of the election and things concerned with it. But for now, have a nice day.